My name is Michael. I work as a private investigator in a small town in Iowa. I did not expect that my career would lead me to such a terrible incident. It all started with a phone call that changed my life forever. The phone rang at 3 in the morning when I was already fast asleep. Usually, only emergency calls are made at this time. I picked up the phone and heard a woman's excited voice. She almost cried. "Michael, please help. It's about my sister. She's missing. The police aren't responding, and I'm sure it's him, the one who killed the others." Her words awakened a sense of anxiety in me. She called her sister's name, Catherine, and began to tell about the strange things that had happened lately. I have already heard about a series of disappearances in our town. The police refused to talk about it, but rumors spread and local residents began to fear. The woman on the other end of the line was convinced that a serial killer nicknamed the Sadist was involved. He left behind terrible traces. No one could predict who would be next. His methods were too brutal to talk about openly. I decided to take up this business, not knowing what horrors awaited me. This was just the beginning. I quickly got dressed and gathered the necessary equipment, trying to prepare myself for anything that might happen. The address the woman gave me was on the outskirts of the town, where the houses stood far apart and the night was even darker. Arriving at the place, I saw an old wooden house with barely noticeable traces of a car on a gravel road. A woman stood on the threshold, her eyes filled with despair and fear. "Michael, it's me, Jennifer," she said, squeezing his hand. "Catherine has always been careful, but lately she's been saying she's being followed. I knew it was serious, but she didn't want to get the police involved. Now she's gone, and I fear the worst." Jennifer let me into the house. There was an anxious silence inside. Everything was scattered in Catherine's room, as if someone was looking for something important. My attention was drawn to the nightstand next to the bed, on which lay several photographs. There was Catherine in the pictures, always the same, but in different places, at work, in the park, even in her own yard. Something was wrong. These photos looked like they were taken without her knowledge. Jennifer confirmed my suspicions by saying they were not from her family album. "He was watching her, Michael," she said quietly. "I don't even know how long it went on. It scares me to imagine what he could have done to her." I looked at the photos again and noticed one interesting element. In each picture you could see the silhouette of a man in the shadows. Whoever it was, he was always there. It seemed to me that this is the same sadist that the rumors spoke about. But who is he? And why did you choose Catherine? Heavy thoughts swarmed into his head. I understood that time was running out and I needed to act quickly before it was too late. Jennifer and I continued to look around the house, trying to find any clue. Catherine's computer caught my attention. He was standing on a table in the corner of the room. The screen was off. I asked Jennifer if I could have access to the computer, and she nodded in agreement. After a quick setup, I turned on the computer and started checking her email and social media. In the history of the browser, there were visits to sites related to shopping and fashion, but I was interested in one thing. A forum about security and surveillance was visited several times. I found a few messages that I thought might have belonged to Catherine. She asked them for advice on how to recognize if she was being followed and what to do in such a situation. The last message was particularly disturbing. "I think he knows that I know. I'm afraid of what he will do if he realizes that I exposed him." I looked through her chat history, trying to find someone she could share her concerns with. And here I found one unusual conversation with a user under the nickname Shadow Watcher. He advised Catherine to follow her surroundings and be careful. But the more I read, the more I was disturbed by his manner of speaking. He seemed to know more about her situation than the average internet acquaintance. I decided that I needed to find out who was behind this nickname. This could be an important thread in the case. But while I was trying to find more information, Jennifer came into the room with a phone in her hand. Her face was white with terror. "Michael, you have to see this," she said, handing me the phone. On the screen was a new text message that went to Catherine's phone, which was left with Jennifer. "Your sister made the mistake of thinking she could run away. Now you're next. Decide if you're ready to follow in her footsteps." Those words made me tremble. He wasn't just following Catherine. He was confident in his impunity and power, and now Jennifer was in danger. I needed to quickly come up with a plan to protect her and find Catherine before it was too late. I felt a cold sweat break out on my forehead. The threat we received was more than just a warning. It was a message of power and control. He played us like we were just pawns in his sick game. "Jennifer, you have to get out of here. It's not safe to stay here," I said, trying not to show my fear. She nodded, but her hands were shaking. I quickly took her out of the house and sent her to a safe place that no one knew about. Then I went back to the computer. It was clear that Shadow Watcher had something to do with this case. I decided to use some of my old contacts to find out who is behind this nickname. It took a few hours, but eventually I got a response. The user Shadow Watcher registered with fake credentials, but was able to trace his activity to a single IP address that belonged to a private network in an old warehouse on the edge of town. This place had not been used for a long time and was empty. It was dark and quiet at night, the perfect place to cover your tracks. I decided to go there immediately, but not alone. I called a few colleagues I used to work with and asked them for help. It was not an official operation, but I knew that without their support, I could be in a very dangerous situation. We arrived at the place around midnight. The old warehouse looked abandoned, but there was something unsettling about the way the doors were slightly ajar. We crept quietly to the entrance and looked inside. The darkness inside was thick, and only the faint light from the flashlights of our phones cut through it. We slowly moved inside, carefully examining everything around. Suddenly, we heard a faint sound, like a whisper or a creak. My heart beat faster. We followed the sound, and at the end of the great room, we saw something that made me shudder. There were photos on the table, the same as the ones in Catherine's room, but now they had both Jennifer and me on them. He knew we would come. He followed us, and now we were on his territory. When I saw the photos, I felt a cold fear creep into my bones. We were under the control of this madman, and he knew our every move. My colleagues also looked concerned, but we couldn't stop now. We continued to inspect the warehouse, keeping our weapons at the ready. Further along the corridor, we found another room. Her door was slightly ajar. I slowly opened them, and what we saw exceeded all my wildest expectations. The room was lined with monitors connected to surveillance cameras located throughout the city. It was a whole surveillance system. Cameras were installed in parks, near shops, in yards. Some of them, I recognized, were installed in Catherine's house. He followed his victims, knowing their every move. One of the monitors was showing a video recording that had just started. On the screen was Jennifer, in the safe place where I left her. My fear became almost physical pain. He knew where she was. She was no longer safe. I looked at my colleagues. "We have to act fast. He's out there somewhere, and we don't know what he might do next." We continued to scan the premises, trying to find any sign of his presence, and suddenly we heard footsteps behind us. I turned and saw the silhouette of a man in a dark cloak. He stood in the shadows looking at us. "Well, there you are." His voice was cold, almost calm. "It took you so long to get to this point." We raised our weapons, but he did not move. Instead, he just looked at us as if we were just actors in his play. "You don't understand, Michael," he continued. "This isn't a game. This is reality, and in that reality, I'm always one step ahead." My heart beat even faster. "Where's Catherine? And what did you do with Jennifer?" He smiled, and the smile was terrifying. "You think I'm going to give you an answer just like that? No, Michael. You have to find everything yourself, but hurry, time is running out." Before we could do anything, he threw a smoke grenade. Smoke filled the room, making us cough and lose our visibility. When the smoke cleared, the man was gone. We remained silent, feeling the tension rise. He had disappeared, and now we had to find him before it was too late. When the smoke cleared, we realized that we had lost precious minutes. It was a real nightmare to be trapped in a game with a ruthless maniac who was always one step ahead. We could not delay, so we decided to split up and search the warehouse. I knew the sadist was masterful in his brutality, but I didn't expect him to be so well prepared. Every corner of the warehouse, every corridor seemed like a potential trap. I listened intently to every sound, hoping to find at least some clue, but it was all in vain. He was nowhere to be found. My colleagues began to return from other parts of the building, their faces full of helplessness. We all understood that he was playing with us, using our fears and uncertainties. I could feel the anger and despair rising inside me, and suddenly we heard a loud sound of a signal. He was coming from one of the rooms. We rushed there and saw a laptop lying on the table with the screen open. It had a video viewer open and we saw the recording. It was a live broadcast. The video showed a room similar to the one where we found the monitors, but with some differences. There was a table with medical equipment, a sofa, and Catherine. She was tied to a chair. Her face was tired, but still alive. The same man in a dark cloak stood nearby. "Hey, Michael," he said into the camera. "I knew you'd find it. You do realize you're just a spectator now, right? You can't save her. No one can." I clenched my fists, feeling powerless and furious. He knew we would see it, and now he was enjoying our helplessness. Catherine raised her head and looked directly into the camera, her eyes filling with tears. She tried to say something, but her mouth was taped shut. "You like mysteries, Michael," he continued. "So here's a riddle for you. There's another woman in town you need to find. She only has a few hours. Time is running out, Detective. Can you save them both?" The screen went dark and we remained in the room in complete silence. Time was running out and we didn't know where to look. I felt desperation grip my heart. All our actions seemed useless, but I could not stop. He challenged us and now I had to find a way to stop him. Catherine and Jennifer's lives were hanging in the balance and I couldn't let this maniac win. After watching this horrible video, I felt confused, but there was no time to panic. We had to find Catherine and Jennifer and we knew the sadist wouldn't have much time left. I focused on the details of the video, trying to catch any clues. First of all, the room where Catherine was kept had a special feature. On the wall behind her hung an old painting of a cityscape. I was sure I had seen her somewhere before. This could be the key to their location. I quickly scanned my memory and remembered an old building on the other side of town that had recently been bought at an auction. It was a historical monument and had a reputation as a place that was used to store old paintings and artifacts. This could be where he keeps Catherine. We immediately went there. The road seemed long, but in reality it was only a few minutes. My head was full of thoughts. What if we were late? Did we have a plan if things went wrong? But I dismissed these thoughts and focused on the main thing, to save them. When we drove up to the old building, we noticed that the windows were closed and the doors were locked, but I knew that wouldn't stop us. We made our way inside using crowbars. There was silence and darkness inside. We quickly moved through the corridors, trying to find the room with the video. We found her on the second floor. The door was closed, but we heard soft whispers and sounds of movement inside. I took the initiative and abruptly opened the door. A room opened before us, exactly like the one in the video. Catherine was sitting on a chair, bound but alive. Her face was tired, but a spark of hope appeared in her eyes when she saw us. We quickly freed her, but there were no traces of the sadist in the room. He seems to have disappeared again. I was disappointed and confused, but saving Catherine was the most important thing right now. "Where is he? Have you seen him?" I asked, trying to understand what was happening. "He left a few minutes ago. He said it wasn't over and he'd be back," she whispered, feeling weak after what she'd been through. We knew he was somewhere nearby, but we couldn't risk it. I decided to send Catherine to a safe place where she could rest and recuperate, while I set out to find Jennifer. The difficulty was that we did not know where she was, and time was extremely short. But I was determined to find her, despite all the obstacles. With Catherine safe, we knew the next step was to find Jennifer. Time was running out inexorably, and the sadist could do anything. He left us without any concrete clues, but I was sure he left some thread that we hadn't picked up on yet. We returned to the warehouse where we found the monitors and the laptop. I decided to check the video again, trying to find something I missed earlier. My heart was pounding with each passing second as I watched the recording over and over again. And then I noticed something I hadn't noticed at first. Behind Jennifer in the room was a map of the city with a small red marker on it. This was not an accidental mark. I zoomed in on the image and realized that this place on the map coincided with the territory of an old, abandoned house on the outskirts of town. It was an old manor that had long stood empty and was closed to visitors. The locals often said it was cursed, but now I knew it was just the perfect place to hide. My colleagues and I immediately went there. On the way, I felt tension in every muscle, realizing that this trip could be the last chance to save Jennifer. When we arrived, I found the house to be just as run down as the rumors said. The windows were boarded up and the door looked like it hadn't been touched in years. We used the crowbar again to open the door. It was dark and dusty inside. We moved slowly around the house, listening to every sound. My heart was pounding, and I could feel that we were approaching something important. And so, we heard a faint sound, similar to a knock. It was some kind of signal. Maybe Jennifer was trying to get our attention. We followed the sound and eventually found the door behind which was the basement. The sound was coming from there. I opened the door and we saw stairs leading down. Descending, we found a small room with thick concrete walls. In the center of the room stood Jennifer, tied to a chair, her eyes full of fear and hope. We quickly released her. She was frightened but generally unharmed. Her words were slurred, but she was able to say one important sentence. He said it was just the beginning. We knew that the sadist was playing his games, and this was only the beginning of his terrible game. We managed to save Catherine and Jennifer, but now it was clear that he was not going to stop. His motivation remained unclear, but one thing was certain: he wasn't going to stop there. We were at an impasse, and I realized that this story was far from over. We gathered together in the safe place where Catherine and Jennifer were now. Both women were safe, but the fear had not yet left their eyes. They were physically fine, but the psychological burden of the experience left deep scars. We didn't know where the sadist was at the moment, but it was obvious that he was somewhere nearby, planning his next move. I decided to go back to the materials we collected during the investigation. We knew he liked to leave clues and play with us. I went through all the recordings, notes, and materials again, trying to find anything we might have missed. And suddenly, I remembered something that could become the key to the solution. I remembered the line he said in the video. "This is just the beginning." It became clear to me that he wasn't going to stop. But what was his ultimate goal? We knew he didn't just want to scare. He needed an audience, witnesses to his actions. I decided to review his activity on social networks and forums. It wasn't easy, but I remembered that he used nicknames on the forums and began to follow his comments and posts. I found several of his posts where he discussed the idea of a game where everyone is the victim and the audience is the judge. It sounded like his sick idea. Then I understood. He wants us all to become part of his game, but not as players, but as spectators. He was going to arrange a finale in which we would witness his cruelty. I contacted my colleagues and we decided to set up an ambush. We went to the place where we thought he was planning his finale, an old movie theater that had closed down a long time ago. This movie theater was the perfect location for his show: dark, empty, and large enough to create a stage. When we arrived at the cinema, it was dark and quiet inside. We moved forward cautiously, searching every nook and cranny. On the stage, we found prepared seats and a projector ready to show. This was exactly where he was going to end his game. And suddenly, the screen behind us lit up. We turned around and saw the video where he was, sadist, in a mask. His voice boomed from the speakers. "Welcome to the finale, viewers. You thought you saved your loved ones? You were wrong. I'm always one step ahead." An image of Catherine and Jennifer, who were in a safe place, appeared on the screen. I felt a chill run through my body. He knew where they were and could get to them. "Now you have a choice, Michael," he continued. "Save them or save yourself. Which will you choose?" At that moment, I realized that he had no control over the situation. He was just trying to scare us. We immediately contacted the security that remained with Catherine and Jennifer and made sure they were safe. We also called for reinforcements to the cinema. Finally, we found it. He was hiding in one of the technical rooms of the cinema, watching our reaction. He was caught and detained. He did not resist, only smiled, enjoying his game to the end. It was a moment of relief and triumph. The sadist was arrested, and he could no longer harm anyone. His plan ended in failure. But even after that, the fear remained that someone else might continue his sick games. We went back to Catherine and Jennifer to tell them the good news. They were safe, and this nightmare was finally over. But a terrible mark remained in our hearts. This case served as a warning to all of us that even in real life there are real monsters, and they need to be stopped by not letting them play on our fears. Play on our fears.